Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, wow, you guys really responded in a big way to my very first time reacting to BlueJay. And many of you, in responding to that video, said that I needed to check out their video on the dumbest Russian voyage nobody talks about. I'm assuming this has something to do with the Russo-Japanese War, which was a horrible disaster for the Russian Navy. But it's not a topic I know a ton about other than kind of the basics. So be interesting to dive into this one. While I'm at it, I want to let you know that I'm trying to increase my presence on social media, and I know a lot of you use Facebook. So I'm taking a cue from my friend JD over the History Underground, who has a Facebook page of his own, and I have created a Facebook page for vlogging through history. I'll be posting a lot of my original content there, battlefield site videos, historic site videos, as well as I'll be uploading a lot of my photos that have never been seen before. I upload some pictures to Instagram, but I'm going to be uploading hundreds and hundreds of pictures from historic sites videos that I've made over the years to there as well. So just one more way for you to interact with the channel, but also to be able to easily share some of the content from the channel in the form of video links on Facebook if you use that. So I'll put a link in the description if you want to check that out. Not much there yet, but be watching even later today. More will be coming. So as always, the link is in the description to the original content that we'll be checking out. Hopefully we see a nice uptick in new followers and new views for BlueJay. I think they do a great job with their videos. So let's go ahead and dive into this one.
There are an abundance of iconic combinations out there, like spaghetti and meatballs, a sorority girl in a white Jeep, or depression and alcoholism. But like US presidents and convertibles, not everything can be a match made in heaven. And as much as Mother Russia would love to dominate the high seas, nearly landlocked nations and stellar navies don't exactly go hand in hand. But for all the Russian Navy's dismal, underwhelming, pathetic lack of glory in the early 20th century, it's always important to look on the bright side. Like how it gives me good YouTube content. So on today's episode, I'm going to learn you all about the misadventures of the Russian Baltic Fleet. It's the turn of the 20th century, and what better way to kick off a new era than
expansion?
So yeah, I mean, think about this for a second. He briefly shows a picture of like cars and things like that and planes. Think about what a person, say, born in the 1870s witnesses in their lifetime. They're born in the 1870s, and so right about the time that they're a child, very young, 1876, you have the invention of the telephone. This is also a time in the early 1870s where transatlantic communication has finally been firmly established. They've laid a transatlantic cable from Europe to North America, so you can have communication within hours, where it used to take days, if not weeks or months in previous generations. So then in the 1880s, now you're starting to see the advent of the automobile, the internal combustion engine. 1900, early 1900s, you see the airplane come about. Now you're starting to see advance in weaponry and things like that. You're seeing advances in things like medical technology. And the world by, say, 1920 could not have been more different than 1870 or 1880. We think that we see technology moving fast now. Imagine what it must have been like for a person who, when they were born, there was not even a telephone. And by the time they're in their late years, they've seen the atomic bomb, and some of them have even lived to see the moon landing. It's just ridiculous.
Russia is cold, which is great for things like stopping Nazis and badass TikToks, but not ideal for ports. Having your port turn to ice every winter is what those of us more versed in nautical terms would call not very cash money. The Russian Empire notices China has a pretty nifty port with, get this, warm water. However, there's this pesky little thing called a border in the way. But that's okay, China isn't European, it's not a real country, so Russia takes control and gets the Chingalisa in the port.
And it's important to note that this is a time when, let's go back to that map.
It's not a real country, so Russia...
This is a time when a lot of the Western European powers are gobbling up Pacific territory, places where they can not only get natural resources, but also have a presence in the Pacific Ocean. So Germany does this, and the Netherlands have done this, and the British have done this, and the French have done this. So Russia's just getting in on the game.
Russia takes control and gets the Chingalisa in the port. Japan doesn't like what they see, so they meet with Russia and are all like,
"Hey,
vodka boy. Invading China is our thing. But Russia won't share.
Invading China is our thing. And remember, just a generation earlier than this, Japan is still relatively isolated from the world, and it's kind of those pesky Americans come along and almost kind of force Japan into opening up to the world. And so now Japan's starting to react on an international stage, and doesn't go well for Russia.
Leaving diplomacy dead in the water. But that's okay. The new DLC just dropped and everyone's just itching to try out their new toys. So the Japanese attack Port Arthur, kicking off the Russo-Japanese War. Fast forward a few battles and the Russians are losing pretty badly. So the Tsar authorizes quite the preposterous proposal of sending the Russian Baltic fleet to reinforce the east. And you may be wondering, but BlueJay, what's so preposterous about sending reinforcements? Well, kiddo, the Baltic part of Russian Baltic fleet means it operates in, get this, the Baltic. And as we learned earlier, boats don't like ice, so you can't go this way to Port Arthur, meaning the Tsar authorized a plan for an 18,000-mile journey around the world, which is 29,000 kilometers.
And these ships don't have that kind of range, so you're going to have to be stopping for fuel and supplies multiple times along the way. There's so many things that can go wrong, but he did make a good point earlier in terms of talking about testing out their new weapons, right? The turn of the century, we've got the dreadnoughts coming onto the scene now, these new kind of super battleships with big guns. And everybody, not just the Russians and the Japanese, everybody is curious to see how new weapons and new tactics are going to perform on the battlefield.
Or 1,140,480,000 gumballs. The Voyage was also a logistical nightmare, as the Russians didn't have any holdings in Africa or South Asia to refuel along the way. Add that to the fact that the fleet spent months at a time frozen in port, so the crew of mostly uneducated peasants couldn't tell you the difference between a bowline knot and a porcelain pot. This group of inexperienced conscripts was put under the command of Admiral Rosyzvensky, a man so prone to anger that his staff made sure to keep a large supply of binoculars at the ready due to how often he would throw them overboard. But hey, fuck it. What better way to learn than a trial by fire, right? So they set sail on their epic quest to turn the tide of the war and bring glory to the motherland. And immediately the flagship runs aground and a cruiser loses his anchor. While they waited for the flagship to refloat, a destroyer forgot friendly fire was on and rammed into a battleship.
A destroyer forgot friendly fire was on. This is not a good start. I mean, if you are planning on not only taking this incredibly long journey, but then going into combat against a seafaring nation. Let's face it, they're an island nation, right? They're not on the level of like Britain in terms of naval power, but I mean, you better have your ducks in a row at least.
Prompting it to return for repairs. Don't worry, men. Surely this can't be foreshadowing. As the fleet pushed on, a growing hysteria spread amongst the crew. They were afraid that at any second they'd be ambushed by Japanese torpedo boats. By Denmark. This is where the war is, if you forgot. But the crewmen didn't have time to worry about things as frivolous as logic, so when two fishermen approached the fleet to deliver a message, they opened fire. The two fishermen survived the false alarm without a scratch thanks to the horrible standards of the Russian gunnery.
You couldn't take out a fishing boat. Now, I understand, it's smaller, it's lower to the ground, there's going to be certain challenges with it, but it ain't shooting back at you, and it's close. This is not going well.
As for their message, they informed Rear Admiral Rosyzvensky that he'd been promoted to Vice Admiral. I earned this. This wouldn't be the only false alarm, as later another ship signaled that she was under attack by 8 Japanese torpedo boats, only to find out that there were 0 Japanese torpedo boats. There was just nothing there. Having survived the Baltic, our heroes made their way
survived the Baltic. They haven't even gotten started yet. By the way, I gotta say again, and we commented on this yesterday, I really like BlueJay's style. You know, I think some people have tried to imitate like Salmonella, oversimplified, and some do it not so well. He's similar to them in terms of his storytelling and his comedy and stuff, but it works, right? Like, it doesn't come across as like a cheap imitation. It's his own style. It works. I like it.
Towards Britain, where they encountered a small group of fishing trawlers at Dogger Bank. But surely by now our skittish sailors have learned their lesson. Ninjas! Streliet this bullshit! Chaos ensued as the Russians laid down hellfire upon the unsuspecting fishermen. The Russians are going bonkers. Some run around the deck aimlessly waving cutlasses to repel imaginary boarding parties, while others just cuddle up on the deck with
This can't be real, right? I mean, he's got to be embellishing some of this stuff. I feel like I got to look this up. Maybe he's not. So the Dogger Bank incident is what this is called, and it happens off the coast of England. And it occurred on the night of 21st, 22nd October 1904 when the Baltic fleet of the Imperial Russian Navy mistook a British trawler fleet from Kingston upon Hull in the Dogger Bank area of the North Sea for Imperial Japanese Navy torpedo boats and fired on them. They also fired on each other in the chaos of the melee. 2 British fishermen died, 6 more were injured, 1 fishing vessel was sunk, and 5 more were damaged. On the Russian side, 1 sailor and a Russian Orthodox priest aboard the cruiser Aurora, caught in the crossfire, were killed. Damage to the Aurora was concealed and only discovered by the deciphering of a wireless message intercepted at the British Felixstowe station. It almost led to war between the UK and the Russian Empire. That would have been an even greater disaster for the Russians if they had to take on the UK, who was ramping up their fleet at this point. In the general chaos, Russian ships began to shoot at each other. During the pandemonium, several Russian ships signaled torpedoes had hit them. How do you not know whether a torpedo hit you or not? On board the battleship Borodino, rumors spread the ship was being boarded by the Japanese, with some crews donning life vests and lying prone on the deck, others drawing cutlasses. It all happened. It all really happened. This is nuts. And I love that we're learning about it.
Life jackets, accepting their demise. Keep it up, men. These Japanese have horrendous aim, Igor. We haven't even taken a hit. But, hey, at least this time we made sure they weren't fishermen first. We're shooting at fishermen, aren't we? Definitely a possibility, sir. Well, at least we didn't fire on our own ships, killing a sailor and Russian Orthodox priest. The British trawler fleet were sitting ducks as their nets in the water prevented a hasty escape, and the Russians fired at them for 20 minutes before realizing their mistake. While this sounds like the setup for a massacre, you forget our heroes are about as effective as a guy holding a fish on Tinder, sinking only 1 trawler and damaging 2 of their own ships.
All of this is leading up to the Battle of Tsushima, which is just an absolute debacle, and now I understand why.
Battleship Oriole really captured the spirit of a TikTok pickup artist, reportedly shooting 500 shots without scoring a single hit. 2 fishermen and 2 Russians died in the mayhem, so at least the survivors can brag at the local pub that they tied with the Russian Navy. This event became known as the Dogger Bank incident and nearly ignited a war between Russia and Britain. The Brits just settled for revoking their access to the Suez Canal, forcing the Russians to make a slight tweak in their course.
Wow.
The slow, coal-powered fleet made its way towards Africa, attacking more civilians and cutting underwater telegraph cables along the way. They met up with some German supply ships to refuel due to the aforementioned lack of African holdings to make port.
Yeah, so isn't this interesting? This is a decade before World War I, where you're going to have the Germans and the Russians going to war with each other. And it's now, granted, it's not the German government, it's a German civilian organization. I think it's the Hamburg America line, which was, if you ever trace your relatives who may have immigrated from parts of Central Europe, Germany, Czechoslovakia, parts of Poland, things like that, a lot of them came through Hamburg. Which was a major port, and the Hamburg America line was one of the primary lines running a lot of those ships.
What nice friends, those Germans. I'm sure the relationship will last. Africa's pretty big, almost as big as my self-loathing, so they took on double loads of coal and kept giant piles of the stuff just sitting on deck. Definitely the kind of thing to land you an EPA audit. But it's not like any sailors are going to die from black lung, except for the ones who did. Morale is low, so the Russian crew decides to lift their spirits by treating themselves to the exotic pets of Madagascar. Alright men, you all can... Hey, Igor, stop sniffing glue for a sec, buddy. You all can go to shore and pick out one thing to bring back with you. Nothing too crazy, like snakes or crocodiles. What did I say? Sir, I can explain. Watch it throw back the shot at Tito's. The ship became a floating zoo as the crew brought on a bunch of animals to roam the deck freely, including a crocodile and a venomous snake, which apparently took a liking for vodka. Panic followed shortly when the snake wrapped itself around guns and...
This is also impossible to believe, and yet we know it's true. I mean, what a great topic for a video, though.
A commanding officer. One sailor gifted the admiral a parrot, which soon took after his rather extensive vocabulary of Russian curses.
You know who else had a parrot that liked to swear was President Andrew Jackson? His parrot was so prevalent with, he just swore so much that they had to remove the parrot from Andrew Jackson's funeral services because he kept swearing.
The flagship soon became overrun with chameleons who would frequently go missing due to their ability to seamlessly camouflage. Hey Igor, have you seen Comrade Camo? I can't find the little guy anywhere. No, I don't think so. Have you seen him private? Yeah, I don't think he's seen him either. But a good zoo isn't complete without an underwater exhibit. And luckily for them, the cooling plant on their refrigeration ship broke down, forcing them to dump all their meat into the ocean and giving them a nice following of sharks. At one point, the fleet was holding one of many funerals for a sailor who died of illness. During the ceremony, the Kamchatka fired a gun salute. Excellent work, gentlemen. Hey, say, you boys did make sure to load blanks, right? Yes, sir. Yeah. Igor, you're looking kinda pale there, buddy. After some more shenanigans, like foiling a mutiny and receiving a shipment of fur boots and coats instead of ammo, Admiral Rozhetsvensky realized that they were approaching Japan. Ah shit, that's right, I didn't train them. So he decided to run some gunnery practice on a stationary target. Miraculously, our group of misfits managed to score a single hit on the ship towing the target. But hey, potato potato.
On the ship towing the target. And now you're gonna go into battle against the Japanese Navy? Wow.
Last, the Baltic Fleet closes in on Japan, approaching the Tsushima Strait during the night. The fleet extinguishes their lights to maintain stealth, all except for the Orel, which, as a hospital ship, kept them burning in accordance with the rules of war. The Orel comes upon a Japanese ship in the dark. And finally, after an extensive list of false alarms attacking fishermen and merchants alike across half of the high seas, they come across an actual Japanese vessel and determine it to be Russian. So they use their lights to communicate with it. The Battle of Tsushima ensues. Will our gallant sailors hold their own against the Japan? The Baltic Fleet was decimated. 4,000 Russians die with an...
Look at those numbers. 4,400 dead, 6,000 captured. They lost the fleet. I mean, they just lost the fleet. 21 ships sunk, including 6 battleships and a coastal defense ironclad, 7 ships captured, 6 ships disarmed. Wow. I mean, it's a miracle that they killed any Japanese soldiers at all, or sailors at all.
An additional 7,300 taken prisoner, compared to roughly 100 Japanese deaths. This effectively ended the war, marking the first time in history that an Eastern power defeated a European one.
And yes, that is our dear Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt got the Nobel Peace Prize for his involvement in settling the Russo-Japanese War. Pretty sure he's the only guy in history who has a Medal of Honor for valor in combat and a Nobel Peace Prize.
Ended the war, marking the first time in history that an Eastern power defeated a European one. Way to go, buddy. Let's add that one to the scoreboard. Oh dear. So, in conclusion, the Russian Baltic Fleet's odyssey around the world is a tale full of shenanigans and blunders, with our troublemaking peasant crew racking up quite the body count of innocent civilians and friendlies before seeing an actual enemy. And yes, while they may have attacked ships from practically every global power, disabled cities' communication grids, killed fellow sailors with gross negligence of safety practices, nearly ignited a major European war, and were about as accurate as Helen Keller playing laser tag, they also taught a snake to drink vodka. 9 out of 10 stars.
9 out of 10 stars. That was fantastic. I can see why you guys recommended that video to me. He told the story, gave accurate historical information, but also did so in a really entertaining way. I cannot recommend him enough. I know there's a lot of other videos, and I'm sure we'll get to some of those at some point. Really good stuff. So please check them out. If you like what you see, give them a subscribe. Check out some of their other videos. Always glad to use the platform that I have, not only to help us to learn more history, but also to maybe introduce new channels that maybe you've never seen before, or that you have introduced to me. So thanks for that. If you like what you see here, please consider subscribing. And if you're on Facebook, check out the Facebook channel through the link below. And I'll be posting some stuff there later today. Thanks for watching.